You're listening to the Utah Checkdown podcast. And now your host, Josh Furlong.
Welcome back to another edition of the Utah Checkdown podcast. I am Josh Furlong. Happy to be back with you as always. It's been a minute. I've taken a couple weeks off from the podcast. Just had some things to do. Didn't get a chance to do it. And quite honestly, there wasn't a ton to talk about. But I have a plan for the rest of the quote-unquote offseason. And, we'll work through those. So looking forward to getting back to this on a regular pace and making sure that we can update some stuff. So we'll jump into that. So for today's episode, it's going to be a big update episode. Just a lot of things going on. Nothing major, but a bunch of stuff happening at the University of Utah, and I feel like I wanted to encapsulate all that together. We'll eventually do some position breakdowns and some other stuff as Utah heads to spring camp here soon. It's about a month away. But we'll get into that kind of stuff and do a little thing. So today we'll briefly talk about the NFL Combine. We'll look at the university's new plans for the Huntsman Center, needed change for the Rice-Eccles Stadium, and a brief update on Utah's PE deal. So we'll do that. We'll also look at Utah or Morgan Scalley's new staff and what that means for the team. So we'll jump into that. But first, let me tell you about our partners, Canyon View Credit Union. Big dreams don't just belong in your imagination. At Canyon View Credit Union, we help turn those dreams into reality. From application to celebration, we're by your side every step of the way because home isn't just a place, it's the people you share it with. At Canyon View Credit Union, flexible options and expert guidance help you create a home that's truly yours, the perfect place to gather and belong. Guiding you home, Canyon View Credit Union. To learn more details, visit canyonviewcu.com. All right, let's jump into this. Today's episode, we're going to start with the NFL Combine invites, and that took place this morning. The NFL Combine will take place here in about a month-ish. I'm trying to remember the exact dates. I had it listed here, and I'm failing you. Let's see. The end of this month, beginning of March. So we will get that here soon. So NFL Combine invites. Utah got 5 players invited to the NFL Combine. And while this is not a guarantee to be drafted, it's usually the players that are at least in consideration and have a higher chance than others that aren't invited to the Combine. Once again, not a guarantee, but if you're invited to the Combine, that's a good indication that teams are interested in you, that there's going to be some conversation about you. And there's obviously 2 players on this list that are, guaranteed NFL draft picks. There's conversations about them being first rounders, and it would be a surprise if either one of these guys didn't. So that's obviously Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu. Spencer Fano with the projected, NFL draft things, if you want to buy into those or whatever it may be, take those with a grain of salt sometimes. These will get a little bit more finalized after the NFL Combine, and teams get to see how these guys test and everything. But Spencer Fano, as of right now, is anywhere between a top 5 to top 15 pick. So obviously really solid opportunity for him, for University of Utah to be able to have a guy like that go in the top 15. And then Caleb Lomu is a little bit more difficult to pin down. He is still, I wouldn't call him a guaranteed first rounder, but I think there's a high likelihood, 85% chance that he goes in the first round. And anything that I've read is anywhere from about top 15, kind of on that fringe 15, to top 25. Now, there's some that have him a little lower at like 31, which is not a bad opportunity. 31 had him going to the Patriots. So, obviously great opportunities that way. So not necessarily a tough situation if you do get down at the bottom of the first round, but it is what it is. So 2 first rounders potentially, and a really good opportunity for Utah to be able to have that feather in their cap, so to speak, and be able to help that. Now, the other 3 players that were invited to the NFL Combine are Dallin Bentley, tight end. He's one that's really interesting. I think he really only had 1 full season of high production. That's not to say that he didn't produce at the collegiate level or didn't do things that were effective, you just didn't really get to see a ton of it simply because 2024 season Utah was not great. And it was a real challenge to be able to kind of get him involved. And so last year really kind of showcased what he's capable of. Now, he is older, and so I'm curious to see kind of how teams evaluate him, but he's one of those guys that I think could sneak into the draft and be a talented player that contributes for an NFL team. So, curious to see what happens with Dallin Bentley. Then there's Logan Fano. Logan Fano, obviously really talented defensive end, curious to see where he projects in the NFL. Some have him as a projected third rounder. It's hard to kind of get a tab on him simply because most of these projections look at first or second round. Some do third rounds and beyond, but it really becomes a crapshoot after the second round. It's tough to know what teams are going to look at and what it's going to be. But if Fano goes in the third or fourth round, I think that's a huge win for him. I think he's talented enough. Obviously, you can see that he's got the skill, but what does that mean for him also as an older player and what he does? So really curious to see what happens there. And then Lander Barton is the fifth player that got an NFL Combine invite. Once again, a guy that has been really solid for Utah. I know there was some up and down moments for him based off of injuries and kind of coverage and what he was supposed to be doing. But this is a guy that is just an all-around good linebacker who is going to be talented. And so curious to see how he projects into the NFL. Obviously, his brother's playing in the NFL may help him. Not that he needed help, but I think when you see that maybe he could be kind of an undervalued player coming into the NFL draft, you can look at what Cody Barton did and see kind of what Lander's pedigree can be, right? And so I think there's opportunities there for all five of these players to get drafted. Dallin Bentley, Lander Barton, most likely probably lower in the draft order, 5th, 6th, 7th round, maybe even Logan Fano to that point. But you've got opportunities for players to be able to be drafted. So good opportunity for Utah to be able to have 5 players invited. Utah pretty consistently has this, amount of players to the NFL Combine, so it's not too dissimilar to many other previous seasons. But good opportunity for Utah, obviously coming off an 11-2 season, and good opportunity to showcase that they're able to evaluate talent, build that talent, and develop them, and then take them to the league. So good for Utah on that. Now, looking at the Big 12 teams looking at the Big 12 teams, it's no surprise that Texas Tech has the most from the conference, and they have 8 players selected to be able to go to the NFL Combine. Clearly, just simply, they are the best from the Big 12. They won the conference, and so that's not a surprise. But they clearly had the talent. They evaluated that. They went through the portal and attracted that talent, and it lived up on the field. And so there's no surprise that Texas Tech leads the conference with 8 invitees, and really curious to kind of see how they move forward in the NFL. But I think they've proven it at pretty much every level that they've been at, and so hard not to project these players to do well. Now, looking just briefly at kind of how this shakes out, no other team besides TCU and Utah have 5 players. I said that weird. TCU and Utah have 5 players invited to the NFL Combine, Texas Tech at 8. So those are your top 3 teams going to the NFL Combine. Beyond that, you have Arizona State and Baylor and Cincinnati with 4, Arizona, Kansas with 3, and then you've got BYU, Houston, Kansas State, and UCF with 2, Iowa State with 1, and then the rest of the teams have 0. So that's Colorado, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia. Colorado is going to be the one that is the most curious there. Just because there's been so much stock put into bringing in a lot of talent and loading up those rosters with the transfer portal, and they have not gotten anybody into the NFL draft. Now, clearly, 2 years ago, a year ago, this was a different case, but nothing for this year. Oklahoma State doesn't really come as a surprise simply because of what they went through. West Virginia still has a lot of younger players, so nothing too crazy. But I think you're seeing kind of how these teams are developing talent and evaluating talent and bringing them in. So nothing really to glean from that. It is interesting. It also depends on when players are leaving for the NFL. So it's tough to kind of say, oh well, this team's better at evaluating talent. That's not how it works. But interesting nonetheless. I think, for Utah to consistently be in that upper echelon of the Big 12 is going to help them. It matters to be able to bring recruits in, but at the same time, you've got to produce at the collegiate level as well, right? But at the same time, you still get a path to the NFL and help others move forward. So really interesting that way. So as we get closer to the NFL Combine, we'll kind of recap what took place there. This is a glorified, everybody calls it the underwear Olympics. It's just guys testing, really getting evaluated and having conversations with NFL scouts, GMs, all the people of importance, there to be able to look and evaluate them. So we'll see what happens. I don't know that there's going to be anything major that we get from that. Maybe you see the two tackles, you maybe move up or down depending on how they test, that kind of stuff. But most of the things that these guys have done over the last few years have already been seen by scouts. These NFL teams are well-versed in them, especially with Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu. You're not going to surprise a lot with those types of players. So, really, really curious to kind of see what happens there. Now, moving on, this one is my favorite thing. Last week, Brett Yormark teased this big announcement that was going to, I don't think he quite said revolutionize, but it was going to be a game changer for the Big 12 and for college basketball. And I always take these types of announcements with a grain of salt because, they're always kind of a letdown. You tease this big thing, and then it turns out to be something that's cool, but it's not anything that is major. So last week, Brett Yormark teases this. There was a lot of speculation on what it could be. There was a few people that were, quote unquote, in the know. These were people that, had conversations with Yormark or whatever the Big 12 fed them information, whatever it may be, that were hyping this up, and so there was a lot of intrigue at what this could be. I don't think there was a lot of expectation that this would be massive, but at the same time, there was some intrigue. And today was the day that got announced. And, I don't want to poo-poo an idea, but at the same time, this doesn't feel like a major situation, a major announcement. This feels like something that you send as a press release that's cool, but not something that's major. And so what this is the Big 12 is putting in what's called the ASB glass floor. Let me say that again. ASB glass floor LED court. Essentially, this is what you saw in the NBA All-Star game this year. I believe even when Utah had the NBA All-Star game, they had elements of it. I don't know if they had the full thing. But what it is, it's an LED court, right? And so what you can do is you can project everything, you can change things, you can during the the opening, starting lineups, whatever, you can have the court shift to that team, and you can project whatever you want on it. And this is different than what the University of Utah had years ago under Larry Kraskowiak, where they would project onto the court. That was more of a video. This is actually the court itself being able to change and move and do whatever. Now, it is cool, right? It is something that's an element that adds to the game, right? If you're in the building, it's something to get you excited, but I don't know that it changes the game, right? Like now, outside of doing something during the game that can highlight stuff, I don't know that this really changes anything for the general fan. This does, however, allow the Big 12 to provide more marketability in terms of sponsorships. You don't just have to have one sponsor on there. You can throw in periodic ones and have that rotate. You're obviously not going to do that during the game, but you could say, okay, this sponsor owns the first quarter, this sponsor owns the second quarter, whatever that may be, and you could throw in a bunch of logos, and that obviously brings more money to the conference and, in theory, brings a little bit more money to Utah and all the other programs. Once again, I don't know that this is a game changer, right? Like, I don't know that this moves the needle. Maybe it's a silly ploy to kind of get people to be excited. at the same time, like, this is a great opportunity for people to bring excitement, right? Is it to the level where, now you're going to go to the Big 12 tournament because they have this? I don't think so. I mean, if you're there, it's going to be cool, and it's probably an experience that will be fun. And I look forward to checking it out when I get to Kansas City I'm going to go for the women's basketball tournament. I will not be there for the men's basketball tournament. But I'm curious to see. Like, I don't think this is something that revolutionizes the game of basketball. I think, if anything, this is more just kind of fun for the fans. It is cool that you can do a lot of different things with the technology. Curious to see if it has an impact on the actual gameplay. I don't think so, because you've already seen this at the NBA level, and I don't think the NBA is going to trot something out like that if it's going to negatively impact stuff. Granted, it was for the All-Star game. But, I don't think this moves the needle, right? And I've seen a bunch of people talking about how this just shows that the Big 12 is revolutionary and technology-driven. Well, kind of. Like, this is not really anything that's, like, changing the game, right? At the end of the day, though, you're doing stuff to enhance some element of the game. And I think that gives Brett Yormark a little bit more of a leg up than, let's say, Utah in the Pac-12, right? They had their fun, and they moved to T-Mobile Arena, and it was a great arena, and there were some good things there, and the experience was better. But at the end of the day, this is still basketball for the players, right? Whether their image is projected on the court for the fans to see, or there's a highlighted three-point line at the beginning of the game to kind of get fans hyped or whatever, that doesn't change the game for the players, right? Like, this isn't anything revolutionary. So curious to see how this really changes anything for the Big 12. It's cool, but at the same time, it's just kind of cheesy, right? Like, now, don't get me wrong. When Utah had its projection on the floor, like, that's cool, right? Like, other teams come in and they see it, but at the same time, this is going to be for everybody at the Big 12. So it's not going to be like this intimidating thing. It's going to be some hype. It's what everybody's done in changing lights in their stadium. I mean, like, this is kind of what it is, right? Like, it's fun, it's entertaining, it adds to the aura of the game, but I don't know that this is a revolutionary change that changes the game of basketball for the actual players. So, love it, hate it, whatever it is, like, it's still cool, but it's not something that I think people should be glazing the Big 12 over to say, like, hey, this is a game changer, as compared to the SEC or the ACC or any other conference out there that may not be doing it. I don't think that that's any difference. So take it for what it is. So maybe I'm just poo-pooing the idea. I doubt it based on the social media reactions to this, but maybe I'm just a curmudgeon, and I am. I'm getting older. I'm over that 40 year mark, and so anything that I do anymore is just curmudgeon-like, and you can deal with it. I don't think so. I think you probably agree with me that this really isn't that interesting of a big announcement. So speaking of, well, I don't know if this is a big announcement, but speaking of something that could be big for Utah, and, big could be an interesting term here, but there was a lot of conversation last year when University President Taylor Randall unveiled his College Town Magic. Basically, it was in his view, a revolutionary change to the University of Utah campus. This didn't just involve athletics. This involved the entire campus and kind of how it was structured, trying to set its, the university up for maybe a potential future in, let's say, the Big Ten, if that's where they want to go. I know that's where they want to go, but it's really just kind of changing the whole landscape around the campus to make it more of an inviting feel for those that do stay there. If you've been on campus recently, you've noticed that they've built so many more dorms. They're trying to get students to stay on campus. They want to make this a place where you can stay and enjoy and turn it into a true college town. Now, obviously, you have downtown Salt Lake that's right there, and it's not too far away, but I think the ideal plan here is you want to keep these college students there, right? And turn it, like I said, into a true college town. And so this College Town Magic is what they're calling it, where they're changing all avenues of campus. And so, you're going to have certain sections that are geared to certain things. I'm not going to go into all the nuances of that, but as part of that, there was plans to essentially get rid of the Huntsman Center and build a new stadium. That stadium was going to go down in the west lot of Rice-Eccles Stadium, so that parking lot, that would be the plan. At least that was the initial plan for this as part of College Town Magic. I'll get into why that plan was made, but this was essentially to centralize a lot of what the campus has, where the Huntsman Center is. That could be used for a lot of different things like retail or dining or other hospitality type stuff, where it becomes kind of the hub of campus and allows people near there. You've got the dorms right there next to the Huntsman Center. You've got all these different areas. You're right next to tracks. It becomes an opportunity to be able to just kind of be the hub. And that's their plan, right? And this is a plan that is going to take, at least a decade to kind of see itself through. And it's still not all the way developed, but that's kind of where it is. So the big portion of this that matters to you is the Huntsman Center, right? And if you've been in the Huntsman Center, you understand, why there's a desire to upgrade this. It's dated, it's old. Obviously, there's a lot of history in that building, and everybody likes to point to the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird type game and national championship, and those are valuable and great, right? You've got that, but anything that you do there in that building is very tough, especially underneath. If you're inside the building, it's not too difficult because it is a very spacious, bowl-like arena, and so that element of it is not too bad. Obviously, the concourse is a bit small, it's dated, the restrooms aren't great, the concession stands aren't great. There's a lot not to like about that kind of stuff, and there's been conversations about trying to change that over the years. Years ago, this is 8 to 10 years now, Utah went through a kind of a renovation and tried to change some stuff and upgraded some different elements of the arena. Obviously, that included the court, that included the video board, some other elements related to the arena with the seating. But for the most part, it's still kind of the same look and feel as what it is. And the biggest frustration for anything here at Utah is ground level. You've got the court, which is great, right? But beyond that, there's not a lot of room to be able to do a lot of stuff. And that extends to locker rooms, that extends to, the ancillary type stuff, the areas that you need to move underneath, because it's just not an area that is big. So for example, gymnastics, that takes a massive amount of the floor. And so when there's times where they want to bring in more than one team, becomes a very difficult transition to be able to house that many teams. And they've had, regionals there, which was very difficult because you usually have 4 teams competing at the same time. It becomes a challenge, right? That's just one use case where you just don't have the space to be able to do what you want. And so it becomes tough. You don't have premium seating, the boxes, the suites, the lounges, whatever you want. And in this day and age, that's becoming more and more part of the draw. Now, that's not to say you need suites, right? But you need opportunities to be able to appease those who want to come that are on a little higher level than others, whether it be donors or other people. The biggest issue around this stadium outside of just being inside there is parking. Nobody can get to the stadium. You can park at the Institute building if you've got passes there, but for the most part, the general public has to park down at Rice-Eccles Stadium, take tracks up or walk up, or find other means to be able to do it. And it becomes a challenge for anybody that wants to come to the Huntsman Center. It's not a great opportunity. It detracts people because they don't want to drive, they don't want to park, far more than even Rice-Eccles. Obviously, Rice-Eccles, there's limited parking around there, but it's much... there's much more around it that you can access, and it's part of the vibe. That's what you do on a Saturday. You tailgate, whatever that may be, basketball or any of these other events that you go to. It's not that case. Now, I don't want to say it's a huge detractor. It is, but at the same time, you see, like for example, gymnastics. They're getting consistently 15,000 people into the arena. So it's not that it can't be done. It's just a challenge and not something that has a good flow. And so they want to look at that. A challenge that this presents too, that's a different challenge, is the Huntsman Center is interconnected to almost everything in that area. And what I mean there is there's so many different tunnels underneath that building that allows the student athletes, for example, to be able to move around to where they need to go. So underneath the tunnel going to the Utah locker rooms, there's a tunnel that goes straight up underneath the ground to their, the men can go to their basketball facility, the women can go to their basketball facility, the volleyball team can go to their volleyball facility. Everything is connected by tunnels underneath there and allows the student athletes to be able to move around without having to go above ground, so to speak. And so, although that's not a problem, that's a good thing. You do miss out on that element when you do move an arena, right? And so these players won't have access to that kind of stuff. Now, at the end of the day, is that something that you need to be worrying about? No, but that was part of the reason why you built the basketball facilities where they are and where you had all those different elements. Gymnastics, they still have to walk out and go to their facility, but there is still opportunities where they can get further underground and be able to get access to a lot of different things. Beyond that, all of these athletes, they move over to the football facility to eat most of the time. Like, there's stuff that you can do in the basketball facility, but there's a lot of things that you have to move out. So it's not like it's this massive deal that you need to work with, but it is something of consideration. Do you give up something that has so much easy access for these athletes to move around without, having to go above ground that they have to take into consideration? So, and then lastly, it's a valuable real estate. As I talked about for College Town Magic, it's an opportunity where that can be the hub, and you've got this massive building that just kind of exists. And not that that's not the case on any campus, but when this is kind of the center hub of campus, you can see that they want to find more value in it and be able to utilize that for, retail or dining or whatever it may be. So a lot of background on that. Let's jump right into what happened. So yesterday, being Tuesday, the Board of Trustees of the University of Utah, heard a presentation from Taylor Randall to, Mark Harlan, all these different key stakeholders on this College Town Magic. And so there's different elements here. I'm going to isolate the athletics portion. And that athletics portion was largely based on the Huntsman Center. So, like I said, the original plan as part of College Town Magic was to move the stadium and not literally move it, but build a new arena down in the west parking lot of Rice Eccles Stadiums. There would be parking garages, underground, above ground, that kind of stuff. That would help alleviate some parking for Rice Eccles Stadium as well. But for the most part, this was an opportunity to kind of lump the two major arena, venues for the University of Utah into one area. And so they could share resources. You've got parking, obviously. You could create a similar underground tunnel system there where, you can work with the Rice Eccles Stadium and the arena, whatever that may be. This also opens it up more to allowing non-university events to be able to have easier access. So, for example, if you want to do a concert at Huntsman Center 2, we'll call it. I don't know what it would be. If you want to do that, it's much more difficult to actually do that at the Huntsman Center, one, because of that parking issue that we talked about, all the other, problems as it relates to what the Huntsman Center is. You build a brand new state-of-the-art building down by Rice Eccles, you've now opened yourself up to much more revenue just from a non-athletic standpoint, because you can get conferences, you can get conventions, you can get concerts, you can get a bunch of different things there that just don't take place at the Huntsman Center right now. So with that as the background, this is the conversation that was had at the Board of Trustees meetings. And I apologize if it's boring you, but this is a major development for the University of Utah. So there's three options that they came up with. Option 1 is renovation light, is what they called it. Option 2 is renovation plus. And option 3 is relocation. And I'll briefly go over each one of these and what that would be. Renovation light, this would be the one that essentially just keeps the Huntsman Center where it is, and you're basically just renovating different elements of it. So, fixing the concessions and restrooms, getting upgraded seats. There would be conversations about potentially taking out some seating so that you could fit in some suite level type stuff or premium seating there to make that work. It would just essentially be a renovation of what is currently there, but it's not necessarily going to be this massive overhaul. It's not going to be this new state-of-the-art building. It's basically keeping the bones that are already there and trying to find different pain points that are going to be needed to be fixed, right? And it's the cheapest option, just simply because, all the other options are going to take a lot of money, but, that's what it is. And so from that extent, it is cheaper. It would save the university money, which would then be allocated to other elements of Collegetown Magic. There's also elements to Rice-Eccles Stadium that could be upgraded, that this money is, earmarked for, that isn't necessarily for Rice-Eccles Stadium. So if you value football and think that Rice-Eccles Stadium needs the bigger renovations and stuff like that, maybe this is your plan, right? Maybe you need the rest of the campus to be able to be better than just worrying about the Huntsman Center. That's renovation light. It's not really a huge plan. It's essentially just, putting new wallpaper up. That's not really what it is, but you see what I'm saying? Like it would allow them to have more opportunity to get more funds simply because of saving money and also being able to upgrade certain elements, but it's not going to be this wholesale change. It's still going to be the Huntsman Center. It's still going to be an older fill. You're not, changing the underground stuff that is really the biggest pain point, that kind of stuff. So there's that. Option 2 is renovation plus. This is what they are saying is it would create, quote, a state-of-the-art arena in its current spot. So you're taking the Huntsman Center that it is, and you're essentially, similarly to what the Delta Center did with the bones that it had, right? They basically gutted the majority of it and rebuilt it, not rebuilt it, but you renovated it in a way that is just a completely different look and feel. Anybody that's come into the Delta Center in the late 90s, early 2000s versus today, it's a drastically different feel, and they're still renovating that to be able to make it fit hockey. This would be kind of a similar project where you're going to completely gut a lot of the elements of what the Huntsman Center is, build out a bunch of stuff. It's going to be costly. All of this is costly. So, I say that with relativity, but it would be costly in the sense that you're taking the bones that's already there and creating something that's a completely different arena out of what's already there. What would take place is you would go down to about 9,000 seats, 9 to 10,000 seats. It would be down from 15,000 here. Most athletics programs, that's great. You're not averaging 15,000 fans. Most stadiums, most arenas around the Big 12 and around the country, are roughly around 9,000, 10,000 seats. So it's not any different than what many venues are, but there's one element that gets lost here, and that's for gymnastics, which does average, anywhere between 12 to 13, 14,000 people. And so there is some give and take there where gymnastics is going to be the one that's hurt most from the amount of fans that are going to be come in there. Now, if you're the university, you say, hey, we can charge more, we can make this more of a premium thing. Gymnastics is a little bit different because you're trying to appeal to as many people as possible, trying to get these young girls in there. And not to say that these same, young girls can't come there because tickets are more expensive, but gymnastics is an affordable option. And so it allows them to be able to have this mass appeal. They've obviously built out this great program that is consistently getting closer to 15,000 than anybody. 9,000 seats, for example, last night when Utah played Houston, and the arena wasn't full by any means, but it was definitely a good size. Their attendance, they announced, was 7,100. So you're going to get a little bit more than that, which is still a good size, and especially if it's full and it's sold out, that place is going to be hopping. And it's going to feel good because they're going to change different elements of it, and that's going to be a good vibe because now it looks full and everything is great. It's going to be different, though, because now you don't have that many people coming in. Once again, ticket sales can go up because now you've got to be able to appease to the people that want to come in, demand, that kind of stuff. And that's going to be the nature for anything, but that's what it is. So the seating is going to be there. They're reimagining the concourse, with the concessions, the restrooms, the premium boxes / suites. Essentially what would take place is you would lose a majority of that upper bowl of the Huntsman Center, and you would reimagine that into a bigger concourse and different elements that way, well, fixing a whole bunch of things underneath and different things that way. Doing it this way, they believe can still kind of serve as the, quote, heart of the campus, where they call this kind of arena village. What they would do here is then build out different elements around the arena, whether it be dining, retail, that kind of stuff, to still make it the hub of campus, but you're doing it in a way that changes it a little bit from what it currently is. And so there would be some new elements involved there in terms of being able to make this where it is still kind of the hub of campus, but it still doesn't fully alleviate the parking issues, right? You can find ways to do that, but you're going to look into this and say, hey, this is going to be the best opportunity to have what we already have. We're not going to go spend even more money to go relocate a new building, build a new, better building, but you now get an opportunity to enhance what's already there and do it in a way that makes it look new and feels good. That, it's still not the wholesale attempt that everybody wants, but it may be the best option for Utah considering what's at stake. So, there's still some pain points there, but all in all, they feel like they can alleviate many of those by adding a bunch of different things, whether it be restaurants or other elements there around it, that makes the Huntsman Center essentially the hub. Plus, you turn it into a much better environment that doesn't feel dated. It's a new look, it's upgraded with technology, all that kind of stuff. So there's that. Now, the last option is relocation. That's simply what the original plan was with the College Town Magic, is moving it down to the west end of Rice-Eccles Stadium. They would say this would be, quote, cutting edge arena. This would be completely new tech, new design. Everything would be brand new, built towards everything that they need for the athletics, for non-university events. They would share amenities with Rice-Eccles Stadium, so there would be some connection there. They would be able to provide plenty of premium seating and experiences that way. Like I said, it would bolster the non-university events and get more people there that way. It aligns with what their College Town Magic plan was, where it would create the space where the Huntsman Center is gone and create the hub, that kind of stuff. So, this is kind of what the ideal goal is, but this is going to cost a ton of money. And so it's not a real viable option, especially in this day and age, barring other elements of the university being able to fund this. It's not going to be an easy ask, and you're going to have to go into significant amounts of debt to be able to pull this off. Now, obviously, they have to. The Board of Trustees now has to weigh whether that's a better option to say, hey, we're going to go into a lot of debt to be able to have a better experience that's going to pay off in years to come. But there's no real easy option here with this. Now, with that said, Mark Harlan at the Board of Trustees meeting yesterday said, quote, it's incredibly historic talking about the Huntsman Center. It's our home. We have a lot of people that work there. We compete there. But the one thing, as we are looking at this over the last year, it just became more and more apparent to me that where we are located is such a great spot, with all the residential halls for the students, and our students who compete live right there. So really diving into it, if I was to give a tilt in my hat, I think Renovation Plus is where my mindset is right now, with a lot more work to do. So it's sounding more and more like there will be a renovation of the Huntsman Center instead of relocating it. Now, depending on how you feel, that can give different emotions for you. But I think just based on a monetary standpoint and kind of what the university is trying to do, the Renovation Plus probably does seem like their best option. They still have to gut it, and they still have to do a wholesale change to it, which will be interesting to see where the university goes for their athletics programs. Do you use the Maverick Center? Do you use the Delta Center? Do you use other venues that can be there? But this is not, if they go that Renovation Plus, this is not something that they can do overnight. This is something that most likely is going to keep the athletes out of that building for at least a year, if not more, and change kind of some workflow for that year. So, you've got that. If you relocate, you can still keep the Huntsman Center going, and you can go build a new arena down at the west lot of Rice-Eccles Stadium. But for the most part, this is kind of the nature of where it is. So the Board of Trustees will be voting on March 10th at their next Board of Trustees meeting. This was all the information created to give them options and to kind of explore it a little bit more as they kind of vote on many different portions of College Town Magic. But really fascinating to see where this goes. As I said, the conversations that I've had and kind of what the conversations were yesterday at the Board of Trustees meeting is leaning to more of a renovation. I would think Utah doesn't want to take just a little step forward. They want to be able to move boldly into a new arena, especially as they move into College Town Magic. And so my expectation is that Utah will go to Renovation Plus. They'll cut seating. They'll completely gut the arena, whatever that means, gut it. But they're going to completely change the nature of what that arena is like and try to make it a better experience and environment for everybody that attends, whether that be players or fans, whatever that may be. That's kind of the expectation. So for anybody that's been paying attention to this, and I apologize for going a bit long on that, that's probably the expectation for the Huntsman Center, going with that renovation plus and moving forward there. Now, a little side note to this, in terms of renovations, Rice-Eccles Stadium will be getting some renovations, and renovations meaning upgrades. The renovation side of it, that still remains TBD. In terms of building out concourse stuff or changing some major pain points there. Obviously, there's conversations around that for the Olympics and kind of what that means, but, we'll see there. But there's going to be an upgrade this year to the lights at Rice-Eccles Stadium. At least that's what I've been told. I've been told this for a while, but I know this is the plan, that the lights may or may not have already gone in, and you're going to have a different experience similar to what many college football programs around the country are doing, where you get the lights that can, the interchangeable LED lights that don't just, turn on as white lights. You can change it to red, you can change it to green, blue, purple, whatever you want, and just create kind of a different atmosphere that will help the environment and the in-game opportunities there. The baseball stadium that was newly built has those in theirs, and what I've been told is that it's going to be a very similar look and feel. So it's no different than many other programs you've seen. But I think that'll help change some of the elements of game day for Rice-Eccles Stadium and give fans a little bit more fun. It does add a little element, but like I said, with the basketball court for the Big 12 tournament, it doesn't necessarily change anything for the players. It just kind of gives a little bit more of an entertaining feel for the fans. So next, private equity. Private equity deal, it's still not signed, and that's not unexpected. There's a lot of conversations that have to be had here. What took place earlier this year when the private equity deal was agreed upon was simply to agree to negotiate and to be able to come to terms with what happens. Anybody that's been a part of these private equity deals or in business deals in general, you get a board to sign off on it, and then there's a lot of the lawyers and everybody else involved that has to kind of, work it all out and actually get it to a point where they feel like they can get it. So, the money / the equity, all that kind of stuff is going to be on the table. My understanding is the University of Utah will still own a majority of this, and so there's not an intent to give Otro Capital, the majority share, but how it's divvied up, how much of a portion, what amount of money is being infused into the University of Utah, how that impacts the donors, all that stuff is still being negotiated. My understanding is that a lot of those details will slowly start coming out here in the coming days, especially for those that have the opportunity to invest in the company. But it's still a little bit out. So the expectation is that most likely, and I say that hesitantly, most likely this is the month where you kind of get that deal finalized, and then you start seeing how Otro Capital will be, invested into the University of Utah operations, what it does for marketing, what it does for potential NIL opportunities. So if you've been wondering about that and where that money is, it's still just working through it. The lawyers are, crossing every T, dotting every I, that kind of stuff. And the university is working that out with Otro Capital to kind of make that all work. So it's not failing in terms of, the deal hasn't gone through or fallen through. I mean, this is just something that takes a while to settle. So they're getting there. You'll eventually start seeing what that entails, and all that. Now, quick look at Morgan Scalley's staff. Now, if you're on social media, especially on Twitter, they've posted graphics showcasing basically Morgan Scalley's entire staff, whether it be the actual coaching staff, down to the recruiting staff, down to video and creative and everything. They've gone all in and given you a list of everything that they've done. That may not sound that big of a deal, but it is much more free-flowing access to what Utah has traditionally done under Kyle Whittingham. Kyle Whittingham was focused on ball, and that's all he cared about. He didn't care about necessarily having everybody understand what's going on inside of his program. You show up to the game, you pay attention, you support the program that way. Morgan Scalley is going to be much more open and free. That's not to say that there's not stuff that he's going to hold back or that he wants to keep for his program, but you're going to see a much more open and free head coach in how he operates. Will it work? We'll see. But I think you're going to, with this alone kind of shows how open he wants to be, just to let everybody know who the people are, who the key stakeholders are inside the program, who you should be following, and kind of what's going on. Beyond that, he's changing kind of the mentality of how the coaching staff operates. So in the past, you did have your position coaches, right? And then you had different analysts that kind of helped. So you had like an offensive analyst, and you may have had a couple of those, and you had defensive analysts, and you had, quality assurance people or whatever that may be. There's a lot of these different people that were kind of doing multiple things and scouting and watching film. What Scalley is doing is essentially creating an assistant coach for every single position. So the running back coach is going to have an assistant. The tight end coach is going to have an assistant. All of these things are done to be able to help the coaches have a better feel, more wholesale feel, I should say, of their position group. So, whether that comes to recruiting or whether it comes to watching film or just anything that's done in that room, it's going to be much more singularly focused on that position. That's not to say that there's not going to be some effort to combine everything together, but there's a lot more concentration being done solely on one position group. And so that assistant or the position coach has a lot more, I don't even want to say, but they have a lot more control over kind of what's taking place there. They can talk about the needs that they have for recruiting. They can get the assistants to be able to help with film and get to the little nuances that aren't done all the time on a daily basis and have it much more focused in on that position. So in theory, this is a great opportunity for Morgan Scalley to kind of showcase what he wants in his staffing, but it also gives these position coaches a lot more control over what they can do. And so I think this becomes to more unity within the program where there's not a lot of different people kind of doing different things. This kind of streamlines the opportunities available to the team and allows them to be able to work in a more coherent effort. Like I said, I'm not saying that Kyle Whittingham had it backwards or that it wasn't working, but the way that it was structured there's some people that were maybe doing one thing that didn't necessarily jive with another. And it's not that they weren't on the same page somewhat. You had different elements going on. So recruiting is going this way and the position coaches are focusing this way. Excuse me. And it wasn't always coherent. Under Scalley, he's trying to make that more of just a consistent, coherent opportunity. Excuse me, my throat got really dry. And so, we'll see kind of what that entails, but I think you're going to see a lot more behind the scenes stuff that allows the program to be able to work together. So, fascinating, as part of this, you're going to see more openness with Morgan Scalley. You're seeing him, if you saw on Twitter the other day, they released a video of the team doing their PRs. Sorry, I'm going to get a drink real quick. All right. They did their PRs and strength training. And, you have a video of Morgan Scalley bench pressing. And, he gets up and he does a couple reps of it, and he's hyped like everybody else is, and they're pushing each other around. And Scalley is just part of the crew, right? That's who Scalley is. He's bringing the energy. He's bringing the opportunities to these players to just be a true player's coach. But at the same time, when you see him as he works, he's not all fun and games, right? This isn't just like, hey, let's all be best friends and my coach is my best friend because we can talk about X, right? This is a situation where he wants to be able to be engaged and enjoy and have fun, but he demands, true respect and dedication to the craft on the field. And so when you get there on the field, he's always been this way. He is a very passionate man in terms of being, concise and perfect with what not perfect, but concise in terms of just working hard on the field and doing it. There's, the buddy side of things. It's not that it still can't be there, but there's a lot more energy and passion towards getting better on the field. And then all the other ancillary stuff, that's where you can introduce the fun and you can joke and you can, have your little dance-offs that he says he likes to do and enjoy that. But I think you're going to see a big difference with Scalley in terms of the energy that way with the team. Will it translate to winning remains to be seen, right? There's many coaches out there that enjoy, their time with their players, and they're a player's coach, so to speak, and they don't necessarily win. I think the way that Utah is structured and the way that Morgan Scally has been involved with this program for a very long time, there's not a lot that's going to change. It's just going to change in terms of the energy of the program and kind of how these players interact with each other and kind of what happens. So just little snippets that we're getting right now. Spring, my understanding is there's going to be a much more open look to spring. I've had conversations that say Scally is really excited about what it's going to be for the public, which lends me to believe that there's going to be a lot more openness to even you as the fans. So really fascinated to see what it is. Maybe we're hyping this up too much. Maybe this is the Big 12 thing where you hype it up so much that it actually doesn't turn into something big. But I do think that Scally is going to try to operate things in a little different manner and try to make sure that the fans are more included in the program, right? It is their program as well, and he wants them to be included. Now, there's going to be definite things where he draws a line and says this is Utah football, and what happens in the locker room is sacred, and you don't talk about that kind of stuff. That stuff's always going to exist. But maybe there's a little bit more openness that allows fans to maybe watch spring practice or maybe even fall practice. Heaven help us all. We'll see. So really curious to see how it goes. But I think you're seeing this in kind of this quote unquote younger generation. You get Kenny Dillingham as kind of a similar guy who demands a lot of respect and attention to detail, but he's open. He lets fans show up to, fall camp and watch how they're going. He lets media watch, a ton of different things. There's not a lot of, I don't want to say scared, but there's not a lot of worry about what's going to, be reported on or different things. It's really just letting everybody get involved in the program. And, you swing too far one way and that can cause a lot of problems for the program, but you swing the other way and, you close things off, you don't give a lot of access and it becomes a challenge. So I think you're going to see a lot more open and public Morgan Scally and team, but at the same time, we'll see how open that becomes. So really fascinated to see there and get there. So there's that. Just to kind of round out the updates, I talk a lot of football on this, and this is primarily what this podcast will be about. But other things are happening right now. Men's basketball, it's a tough situation, right? They've won one game in the Big 12. This is clearly one of those rebuilding years. I think everybody expected that. I think many expected this team to be a little bit further along than they are this year. But it's just one of those things that's going to be a challenge. And, you're going to have Alex Jensen who's trying to build his culture here and kind of get it to work, but he just doesn't have fully the players that he needs. And we'll see what happens. It was interesting to talk to Kelvin Sampson last night, the Houston head coach, who obviously has been phenomenal at recruiting and just winning on the court. Talked about his first season. They won 13 games, and 4 of those games came at the very end of the season, as they put things together. But he said, he trusts that Alex Jensen is doing it the right way. He sees that he's doing it in a similar way in terms of putting in his culture, putting in his identity. The fact that Utah could hang with Kansas, through most of that game until Kansas does what Kansas does and takes over, was a key indicator to Sampson that this is a team that can be effective under Alex Jensen. So I know for some fans you're disheartened and frustrated with it, but the insiders and the people that watch this understand that this is not just a 1-year rebuild, right? You can go get players in the portal and everything, but it's more about creating the culture, creating the right types of players that you want, recruiting to that type of player and consistently hitting on it. And that's what you see at Houston. They have their players that they go after, and they're incredibly effective with it on the defensive side, and they win at a high level. So, and I think Alex Jensen has looked at him as kind of the model of how he wants to build Utah. So really fascinated to see what they can do at Utah, maybe following the Houston way. He's not going to follow it to a T, but looking at it in a way that way. So women's basketball, they have a game tonight. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, they play at Arizona State. They're ranked 10th in the conference. They've done okay, but they've kind of fallen off as of recent. But the women's have 6 games left. They're on the hunt for a Big 12 tournament bye, that first round bye. If they can get a second round bye, even better. But that's what they're hunting for, and they're in the mix, right? This is a conference that has been really solid. The teams are beating each other up because they're all really good, and so really curious to see how this goes. Right now, Utah is in 7th place, but half a game out of even 3rd place. So it's really tight. We'll see how this goes. They are NCAA tournament bound right now. They are currently a 10 seed in the projections, but you're going to want to win more, right? You're going to want to be able to improve your stock, and this is a team that's still young and still growing, but they have the opportunity. Their schedule coming up has enough leeway in it that they can get some wins. The majority of your games are teams ranked, 10th or worse. You do have Oklahoma State at 5th and Colorado at 6th, so you get 2 tough games, both on the road. But for the most part, this is a team that's in the hunt, and as long as they consistently put it together, they can be in the mix. Lastly, gymnastics. This is a team that has been up and down. I wanted to do an episode recently about kind of what happened, but I didn't get a chance to get into it. But there's a lot of pressure on this program, as there is every year. So I don't want to say that it's any different this year, but it's a younger program as well, younger athletes, and so it's just trying to figure out all that's going on and trying to get it to work. So they're on the up and up right now. There's still a lot to improve on, but this is a team that is come together and is moving forward and doing well. They have a meet against BYU on Friday, which should be pretty entertaining. The Huntsman Center is trying to bring as many flags into the building to see if they can set a record there in terms of bringing flags, so that kind of stuff. So lot is, it's a roller coaster ride for a lot of these teams right now, but especially for women's basketball and gymnastics, there's still a lot of potential and opportunities available for them, and we'll see what happens. But I think as we get closer to the end of these seasons, we'll see what happens and see how Utah fares in what it's able to do. So with that, like I said, that was a lot of updates. I apologize for just kind of moving through a lot or spending too much time on the Huntsman Center, but I think there's a lot of different things going on up at play, and you got to have some of these episodes every once in a while. So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna move into positions breakdowns for football, especially as we move into the spring camps, kind of looking at who some of the key players are, who's coming back, what kind of usage that they can get, and that kind of stuff. So we'll kind of go into that cadence moving forward and kind of jump into that as we prepare for spring camp and kind of get into the postseason for these other programs. So with that, signing out today. Hope you have a great time, and we will catch you later.